Usherwood and Elizabeth Theobald, and we're continuing our series of discussions around supporting candidates either into their first non-executive director role or indeed to develop their portfolio career of non-executive director roles. So thank you for both joining and welcome.
Hello. Thanks, Nicki.
So we'd like to talk about paid NED roles versus non-paid NED roles, and I think this is a question that comes up quite a bit. What are your recommendations for how a candidate should embark on getting a paid non-executive director role? Elizabeth, can you maybe speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So it's quite different, actually, and partly that's because it's such a highly competitive space. So there tend to be fewer paid NED roles around than there are unpaid. And within that, that there'll be a mixture of companies looking for NEDs, and so the pay actually varies greatly as well, whether it's a startup with lots of, with little funding, or whether it's an established company that's already kind of well on its way. So real kind of mixture there. The other thing around this is that, for paid roles, I guess what we find is that the appointing boards will generally look for board members who already have board experience. So that higher bar is also there in terms of gaining entry. So there's the competition, and then, in terms of fewer roles, and then also they're looking for people who are already experienced board members. So I think it's really important to demonstrate very clearly what value you can add. And this is about being very clear in your communications and consistent in your communications about what value you add, not only in the kind of documentation that you might provide around bio and all of those things that we've talked about in one of our previous segments, but also I think, your LinkedIn profile, the kind of any, live streams, something like this that might be around your photograph, all of these things need to be quite clear on who you are and what your areas of expertise are, because of course people will do their research on you, and ensure that your information is quite succinct. Again, people are looking for somebody who can communicate in fewer words and be concise. I think the other thing is to kind of use your network. So talk to your network, find out what's going on, but don't go for everything. I think it's about finding those unique roles that play to your strengths and the value that you can bring to a board. And then, I think that you can also find other ways of getting the experience. So when we talk about boards seeking board members with previous experience, there are ways to get unpaid experience as a board member through, school governing bodies or not-for-profits. What I would say on that note is that's those are really important roles, so they shouldn't be taken lightly, and they certainly shouldn't be just as a step on the road to a paid NED position. They need to be treated seriously and committed to. So it should be things that you're passionate about. So I guess, having a kind of action plan of, and I think, as I say from the beginning, it's about knowing who you are, knowing what you bring, making sure that your information is consistent, working through your networks to find those opportunities, and then also putting yourself in the best possible space in terms of previous experience that you can to be in the running for those kinds of roles. Helen, would you add anything to that?
I think from my perspective, I think sometimes people might approach the non-executive director roles with the view that I only want paid, that's all I'm going to go for. And actually, in the main, and I'm always very happy to be proved wrong, but in the main, what we find is that candidate or individuals really have to take incremental steps with non-executive director roles. You have to build up that experience. So I think that whole bit about taking on a voluntary non-executive or trustee or governor position is a really good grounding. It gives you a very solid foundation by which to then build upon that experience, to then explore some of the maybe more regional or national non-executive director roles that are out there that might require a bit more time commitment and will also be paid as well. But it's you have to take those incremental steps. And as I say, if people were to then come back to me and go, oh, I've done it, brilliant, really, really pleased that they've achieved that. But it's not always the case for everyone that they'll just secure a paid non-executive director in the first instance. So I think it's just about being pragmatic about it as well.
Thanks, Helene. And perhaps we should have started with this question, but for those that maybe don't know, why do some organisations opt to have a paid role versus a non-paid role?
Big question.
Yeah, that is a really big question. And, it's something particularly in the not-for-profit sector that's always up for debate. The debate rages fierce about whether, trustees and boards should be paid or whether they shouldn't. And there are kind of organisations that sit in between that. So not-for-profit world, or in the main, isn't paid, but there are instances where, for example, something might have been outsourced from local authority or public sector contracts. Might be going through that a not-for-profit board actually will be paid, or something like an NHS board will have some money alongside it, but not as much as a commercial. Something like a housing association may be paid again to a lesser degree. So it doesn't sit that clearly as to the whys and whys not. I think it's built up that way. I think part of it is about funding. For a not-for-profit, it's very difficult for them to pay their board. But at the same time, there's something to be said for being able to recruit the best people, and sometimes you need to pay for that. Having said that, in the not-for-profit world, there's an argument to be had that says, well, if you don't pay, then you get people who are genuinely passionate rather than those who are there for the money. So I think it's a real blend. I don't think there's quite a straightforward answer to that. Helen, would you agree?
Yeah, I think some of it is largely historical. So I think, as Elizabeth said, we see it in higher education all the time with governors, this debate about whether or not they should be paid for their time. They can often be really chunky roles, but it is also an added potential expense for an organisation. So, I think we'll see it change. We've definitely seen the market change as well. I think lots more people have become aware of non-executive director positions and the opportunity to build a portfolio as well. And that's really attractive, I think, especially in the current marketplace when people are looking for that flexibility and opportunity to maybe work across different sectors as well.
Thank you both for your insight. So